Warm greetings from City of Palaces, Mysore. I'm Dr. Meenakshi S, working as Associate Professor at Department of Prosthodontics, JSS Dental College and Hospital, JSS Academy of Higher Education Research. Welcome you all to the first national conference of POPMA, Practicing Oral Pathologists and Microbiologists Association. Before I could start my presentation, I would like to express my humble pranams to all my mentors, my teachers who've been instrumental in my journey. The art of teaching is the art of assisting discovery. Lal Bahadur Shastri ji did coin the slogan Jai Jawan Jai Kisan just to enthuse the farmers to bring in the increase in the production of rice. Later, it was Atal Bihari ji who also coined Jai Vigyan to show the importance of research in science and technology. Later, it was Prime Minister Dr. Narendra Modi ji who did in the Indian Science Congress did mention what is called as Jai Anusandhan because research is often driven by innovation. It is always important to concentrate on research aspects also. Since 2014, there has been a substantial increase in the investment in the field of science and technology. Our dental products is also hitting the market, and there has been a tremendous rise in the dental products as well. Thanks to the government of India, that India has risen in the Global Innovation Index of 2024 from 81 jumped to 40th, now it is 39th rank. Lot of efforts made by the government. And hence today's topic, no more silos, only solutions. So let's foster industry academia collaborations. It is mainly through collaborations we can bring about large amount of solutions even in the field of dentistry. The research in the field of dentistry is also very much evident as early as 500 BC, and it is quite evident. So it's very important to bridge our proud past to a bright future. Why is this research so important? Why is this buzzword? Research in the field of dentistry is progressing at a mightier speed worldwide. The situation of dental research in India, but it's still in the nascent stage with 300 dental colleges across India. The faster growing population of our country, rapid westernization, the lack of resources are increasing the burden of dental disease, and hence every one of us has to be involved in one way or the other in the field of research. The development of any novel product requires several steps prior to its use in the clinical treatment or entering into the clinical application. So this is a generic timeline from the conceptualization to its clinical application. This also requires large amount of ethical practices in the field of medical or engineering or pharmacists or oral pathologists or microbiologists. Ethical practice is prudent. There should be quality, good control, good clinical practices should be backed up with good practical approach as well. When we think about the concept, everybody, when we think about the research per se, it definitely you need to have that concept in mind to identify the need of why you are supposed to get involved in research. Followed by what kind of material selection you're doing, the design and fabrication, followed by is it supported with definitive scientific evidence through lab results, followed by business model, if at all, if you are innovating a new molecule, is the new molecule or the new idea being patented so that you're safeguarding your invention? Is there a registration? Followed by manufacturing and scale up of the production. Later comes the clinical application. So ethical practice is a must, and ethical guidelines has to be appropriately followed in each and every step. Developing research projects for successful translational exits requires or mainly follows definitive phase gate process. You can actually see 5 different gates here. Research in the case of phase 1 requires thorough planning and execution, followed by preclinical development, where you identify the feasibility of your research or your idea. Preclinical development phase 3 requires verification at each and every step, followed by phase 4, where you validate whether this research can be driven forward to enter into the clinical scenario. Later enters the phase 5, which includes investigational design or investigational drug, whichever you're supposed to intend to do in your field of research. In every phase gate, thorough validation is very crucial, and thorough monitoring is very crucial by different members in your teams so that the success is measured at every possible step. But as you see the generic timeline, There's something called as translation research in a dental setting, or often called as triad setting. But what is a consistent finding but that we budding researchers often face? The consistent finding in health services research is that it is unpredictable, it can be slow, it can be a haphazard process. What could be the reason behind for it being very slow or haphazard? Mainly the mindset of the researcher that it is too difficult to execute, and it is often problematic from conceptualization to clinical application. So let's try to identify and relate what could be the barriers of research in dentistry, which has already been published by Taylor et al. In Journal of Dental Research in 2021. And he has enlisted large barriers of research in dentistry, which both me and you would definitely relate to. The first barrier would be the dentists accumulated the knowledge and experience and adherence to only accepted standards, which is often given to us by our experts and colleagues. Searching for high quality evidence can be complicated, overwhelming, and time consuming. I think most of us could definitely relate to such kind of barriers. The complexity of the research per se. Why the research identification of a journal or an identification of article is too tedious, especially when it comes to biomedical research field, because approximately around 5,000 articles are being published every day, every single day, in pertaining to any area of research which you're interested in. Clinical decisions are based on the results of individual studies. There is no evidence per se. So it lacks the best evidence. Very disheartening for we researchers is that less than 10% of dental care is based on validated dental research. There's lack of clinical practice guidelines, complexity in shifting from the present practice model to one which is called as evidence-based dentistry. Last but not the least, which most of us would relate to, is sacrificing our own financial incentives. Definitely not being, trying to get involved or getting the right kind of research grants from the external funding or university funding. According to UNESCO Institute of Statistics, only 27% of the total health researchers in the world are in the developing countries, and only 1.2% of annual health research is attributable to South Asia, which is quite disheartening. What is the actual fate of research studies? This was one of the articles which was published way back in 1992 itself. And the reason what the author has quoted is the most frequent reason for not starting at a study was failure. The first important barrier was failure to obtain the funding for your research. And the main reason for abandoning a study was difficult to recruit the study participants. So these would be the two important barriers or the fate of any research study. In the research world, there's something called as valley of death. It is nothing but before it starts from the laboratory and reaches the bench to bedside approach or clinical application, most of the research ideas get withered away. Because our external funding bodies mainly fund basic research. But we researchers would also like to drive the research forward into applied aspects where large amount of clinical trials in the form of animal studies and in vitro studies needs to be backed up for our research data to enter into the product development and enter into production of any kind of research which we budding researchers need to carry out. But what is actually happening is in between, we lose that interest from lab to bench. Before it enters into the market, our interest is withered away. So when it comes to my expertise or my interests, I would definitely like to highlight on these 5 important aspects which we researchers should actually focus on. First is the skills. You need to hone your skills on research. By keeping an open mind, being more curious, being more persistent, being patient, maintaining high standards in the kind of research practice you are involved into, being flexible to the mentors' guidelines, as well as you should have an exploratory approach, not always a descriptor approach. And hence, we should develop a research mindset. As mentioned earlier, choosing your own research topic, carrying out literature review, refining your structured question, evaluate your resources, choose your methodology, examine the research findings, reach the conclusions and make recommendations, and finally disseminate your findings in the form of research publication. So this honing of skills is attributable to any kind of researcher. So what could be the barrier or solution to the barriers of research? How do I enhance my skills is basically by asking, acquiring, appraising, applying, and evaluating, ultimately cumulative, which will sum up to patient care must be evidence-based, integrating the best research evidence and patient values. So we will be able to get the best research evidence only through systematic review and meta-analysis, and it mainly forms the first hierarchy of any pyramid. So the researcher should have the best available evidence if you're doing a literature review, followed by clinical acumen. You need to hone your clinical skills as well. At the same time, identify the patient values is of prime importance, and hence we should align our research questions, assess our research questions, and accelerate the research questions to identify the best possible solution. The next important milestone which we researchers should actually groom ourselves into is new ideas. How do you actually get new ideas? Is mainly basically through connectivity. Now, we are no more working in silos, be it an oral pathologist, be it a microbiologist, or a prosthodontist. We need to collaboratively work. That's when we can get into the newer concepts by communication. If at all, if you have a research idea, try to get connected to different medias. Now here I've just put in 2 or 3 medias, that is your ResearchGate, academia, or LinkedIn, and try to identify people who are actually working in those areas, in those fields, and try to get connected with those people, which will help you in establishing your own ideas, whether you're going in your right direction. Try to discuss and try to get the right findings in place. That's how you can drive the research forward. It's very important to collaborate. We cannot underestimate the power of interprofessional relation or interprofessional collaboration. And hence, it's very important to have collaboration between research and practice, because we are into a field of dentistry 4.0, where we need to collaborate between dentistry. If at all, if you're interested in material engineering or dental engineering or developing a new molecule, the basic funda or the basic idea is mainly to collaborate. After honing your skills, having a new idea, it's very important to collaborate and try to exchange ideas between different researchers. Multidisciplinary collaboration, which will bring in the best kind of research solutions to your research question. So hence, teamwork and balance are quite essential. Next important thing is our mentors. Diverse group collaborators. It is very important that we researchers get involved with diverse group collaborators. We should not have that fear in mind that if at all, if I have a research question and if I share with my mentor, it definitely gets diluted. It is not going to happen anymore. It is very important that we get engaged with our mentors, discuss with mentors, because diverse group collaborators will give you the best possible solutions to your research question. Only an oral pathologist, only a microbiologist, only a prosthodontist will not drive the research forward. It is basically through collaboration and interprofessional approach we will get the best possible solutions, because our ultimate goal is the patient care. So we cannot neglect the patient care. In order to enhance the quality of care delivered to patients, we need to collaborate. Having identified the skills, obtaining the new ideas, enhancing your relations, and identifying your mentors in your areas of research, what drives actually the research forward is our funding. So we have innumerable funding agencies which will fund your research. Identify the right thrust area and try to apply for the funding agencies. And this is a small project life cycle which I have depicted here. Finding the funding, developing proposal, submitting the proposal, set up the project, manage the project, and close the project. But why do we have to write a research grant? I think all of us are well aware and would definitely relate. That is, it is mainly to get money, some amount of finance to support the research, whatever field we would like to do. At the same time, it also enhances your career development, scientific visibility among different specialty. There is new responsibilities and new skills to learn and hone as a researcher. But what is the current reality? This is the current reality, where you can see a parabola. On either end of the parabola, you can see so many funding agencies will not be funding your interested or your area of interest in whichever funding agency you would have put in. Only small amount of research ideas gets funded for value creation, and most of the funding often goes unfunded. Most of the research often goes unfunded because of value friction, mainly because we would not have addressed the thrust area of the grant agencies which you have approached to. At the same time, you would not have a um, prior art search for your area of interest. You should have a definite amount of pilot data already available, if at all, if you are putting your research across to any kind of funding agency, and some pilot data has to be backed upon to what kind of research you're doing. So this is the reality, and we are all accepting that kind of reality. If your research is not backed up with some kind of pilot data, then try to obtain the pilot data and then approach the research funding at a later date. That will have greater value. At the same time, the funding agencies will also accept and acknowledge the kind of research backup you have already entered into. So that has better visibility, at the same time better authenticity. So basic research grants significantly increases scientific performance, scientific visibility, and definitely the funding has something called as funding continuum. Whenever you get a fund, it is very important you do some amount of publications so that scientific visibility mainly enhances. At the same time, it also gives large amount of impact to the budding researchers also. So the barriers for technology transfers are: a technology must exist whenever you are approaching for a research grant. Is there something novel in your area of interest? Even if you're collaborating, is there sufficient team buildup, team prioritization, team credentials in your research interests? Organizational structure and mechanisms is very important. You need to have definite organizational measures being taken up from your parent institution. At the same time, if at all, if you're developing something novel, you should actually safeguard it by patenting and registration. And identify the market. If at all, if you're pitching in for some kind of drug or some kind of product or some kind of device, there should be market for it. Otherwise, the industries which will be approaching you will not be able to imbibe the kind of novelty which you have pitched into. So you should also identify that what kind of market you're going to pitch in for industries, and hence you should always target the private companies. So very important. So the key for these barriers is prioritize, standardize, and validate your research. As Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji has always told that Atma Nirbharta requires Anusandhan. There is always requiring of partnering for tomorrow's potential. And hence today's topic, not any more silos, but fostering industry academia collaboration for enhanced solutions. Tell the story of the mountains you climbed. Your words could become a page in someone else's survival guide. This was quoted by Morgan Harper Nichols. So here I am to share my little journey of research, where we could collaborate with group pharmaceuticals and even with IIT Bombay, where we developed sensor-based operators dental chairs. Let me start my journey here. As I did highlight the conceptualization journey, the generic timeline from concept to lab to business model and clinic. Let me showcase my journey to you. How did I identify the concept? So my concept was the clinical need to get rid of the biofilm under the dentures, which is often very virulent, and my area of interest was Candida. So Canada associated denture stomatitis was my area of interest, though it was not an unmet need, but definitely a clinical need, but because it often goes unnoticed. And hence, we identified our materials. My materials of selection was basically natural herbs, natural polymers, because I come from a background of prosthodontics. I am more interested in polymer science, and here I am who will be showcasing on natural polymers. So we identified few herbs and natural polymers for developing a material which could get rid of Candida infections, because Candida infections is often prevalent and there are different antifungal drugs already available in the market. And as most of us are well aware of, there is great hype in what is called as antimicrobial and antifungal resistance in today's world. And hence we wanted to target something called as Ayurveda or herbal medicines, which is more user friendly and definitely lacks resistance. So that's how we entered into laboratory studies to know whether there is compatibility of this kind of materials and exhibiting the antifungal activity. And hence we did a little bit of in vitro studies by material selection, designing and fabrication, followed by disk diffusion method to identify whether the potency of the drug is not hampered, at the same time exhibiting the antifungal activity. This was through micro or disk diffusion method. I think all the microbiologists would definitely love to hear what we have done so far. So after identifying that it was effective through zone of inhibition, we also tried to carry out the cytotoxicity studies after having the in vitro studies, disk diffusion method followed by minimal inhibitory concentration, that is for getting to know the MIC concentration of the drug. We also wanted to know whether it is causing any harm to the viable cells inside the oral cavity before it hits the clinical application. And hence we also targeted human gingival fibroblast studies to identify whether it is causing any cytotoxic effects. The synergism between the different herbs and the natural polymer was evaluated through cell viability studies as per OECD guidelines. Later, once we got to know that it was safe, effective, and 98% of cell viability was observed, we entered what is called as the randomized clinical trial. And hence, here comes the role of good clinical practices, good laboratory practices, and good ethical practices. And hence we did take the clearance from our institutional ethics committee following the ethical guidelines for biomedical research on human participants, following the cohort guidelines also. And hence we started our clinical trials at our JSS Dental College and Hospital at Department of Prosthodontics. Following which we got our molecule and formula patented. It has been published and it has been granted because we wanted to safeguard our formulation. How did we end up in getting the product forward for manufacturing scale-up production? That is the business model comes up. The business model comes into play here. We could pitch into group pharmaceuticals and hence we could get the letter of intent from the chairman of Group Pharma, who was very kind enough to take the product forward. So he issued the letter of intent way back in 2021. And thus, all this could culminate because of the funding which we received from Department of Biotechnology for the smooth conduct of such kind of research projects. So that culminates the whole conceptual guideline. So this is how the product was conceptualized, how the clinical trial was done, how the in vitro studies was done to identify the antifungal activity with the minimal inhibitory concentration of both the herbs which we have utilized along with the natural polymer, which was the almond gum or the badam gum. So this was a cumulative product which in synergism could exhibit antifungal activity when compared to the synthetic drugs. So our oral pathologists will be enthused. We also did the exfoliative cytology studies to know whether there was reduction in the fungal hyphae before and after usage of our developed polyherbal emulgel. And to our surprise, there was definite reduction of candidal hyphae as well. This was SEM analysis before treatment and after treatment, and it is quite well evident that there was inhibitory effect of candida. Before the treatment, it was quite huge, and after treatment, there was definite inhibition of candidal growth. The viable candidal growth was definitely reduced. After having enough scientific backup and after having pitched in to group pharmaceuticals, we could also have the group pharmaceutical people, that is the research and development of group pharmaceutical people, coming to our college to know how the drug was actually developed. So commercial translation was also taken care. So this is the roadmap of commercial translation of our project, a case study of developed emulgel. So we also could showcase how the product was actually developed to the research and development of group pharmaceutical people. Followed by clinical trials was also showcased to group pharma people, because though they have issued the letter of intent doesn't mean that the product should hit the market. Translation should happen. So we could actually pitch in the development of the product. At the same time, clinical application of that product was also demonstrated to the officials from group pharmaceuticals. Later, We could also sign the licensing agreement, non-disclosure agreement between the chairman of Group Pharma and registrar of JS Academy of Higher Education Research. So um, this was novel, and it was quite enthralling that we could receive their licensing agreement signed. So this was patent protection and commercialization, which we did. And this was how the product was actually developed. And I'm happy to say that the product has been launched on 25th-9/2025 with all the university officials and Group Pharma officials. Now the product is entering the market. So this is how the translation actually happens. So we at JSSCHER mainly believe in vision and mission. The vision being to inspire the academia and young minds to invent, to innovate, and to incubate, and to foster the entrepreneurship. And hence we do have technology transfer offices where they get different minds together to enhance the healthcare. So that forms the healthcare hub or the healthcare incubator. So our mission would be to promote science by advancement of research and knowledge through entrepreneurship. And hence, what is more important is effective networking for promotion of industrious startups. This is how we entered into this journey of industry academia collaboration. So throughout this journey, what we actually learned, you don't have to be too big to collaborate. It's very important to build a trust, to culminate and enter into this great extent. So building trust is a culmination of many small steps. Incremental innovation is the need of the hour. There should be a robust review process, as I did mention about the phase gate process. So every phase has to be reviewed quite a lot of times, that the objectives has been satisfied from one phase to the other before it hits the clinical application. So developmental projects should always be people agnostic. Try to identify what is the need of the hour and try to pitch in your area of interest. So what actually we learned throughout this journey, what colleges actually have? Colleges have definite amount of knowledge. We do have researchers in the form of teachers, mentors, collaborators, sometimes students also, and definitely a good set of library. There's ample amount of time for we researchers and for PhD research scholars as well. And cross-discipline access is very crucial here and very important, which can be taken as an advantage. And what industry has, how industry could help us if we have budding researchers at our institution. Industries has the ability to collaborate. They have the reach. They can reach large amount of population. They have the speed with that we researchers at academia will not be able to shoot up. So they do have that kind of speed, and they do have resources in the form of funding, and they can reach the market at large at limited period of time. And hence we need this fostering of industry and academia between researchers and industries. And how can we collaborate? Requirement for a collaboration cell is very crucial, especially if you have an IP cell for commercialization division. Propagate your area of expertise. Try to speak. Try to get identified among your area, identified among researchers who are actually working in your area of interest. Define the process. Have a strict review program between the mentors and diverse group collaborators. Very important is timely investment. Try to identify what has to be done at what particular time. And very important for we budding researchers is to celebrate small wins. That is what will drive the research forward, and that's what happened to me as well. Sometimes you can jointly appeal along with industries to the government to allow for CSR funding, that is the corporate social responsibility funding for research in universities. So my message would be to start small, start smart, and to focus on collaborative research. Identify, if at all, if you have developed a new instrument, a new molecule, or a new device, try to obtain the certificate of analysis of these new products. That is the dossier, it is often termed as dossier, or the methodology of how the product actually works. And always concentrate on incremental collaboration and definite amount of analytical method development, how the method is actually developed. So that also you need to understand and move forward. So this is what is called a certificate of analysis. When I said almond gum and badam gum, that is a newer molecule which we have used across in our developed polyherbal emulsion, and we have actually succeeded in getting the certificate of analysis for that. And I'm very happy to share that we have also got the Ayush approval for our novel drug. Now, having said about industries, academia, and everything, we are also supposed to give our respects to our teachers and mentors. How can teachers help? Stay up to date with new developments. Try to discuss with your teachers. Try to collaborate with a diverse group of collaborators among different fields, with other streams and different departments. Interact with the industry if at all, if you get an idea. If you try to participate in hackathons, medical hackathons, it will be of great interest and importance to you if at all, if you have a new idea in mind. So to conclude, material science has come a long way since then, and newer definitions are being offered with every passing year to account for novel advances in clinical medicine. It's very important to develop a deeper understanding of product development or process development when conceptualizing new ideas. It is imperative that the end goal of clinical translation should be born in the minds of researchers. What should be your ultimate goal is patient care. So interdisciplinary and interprofessional collaboration is a critical pathway to identify issues with current technologies and for translating academic research to clinical practice. So thank you so much for your patient hearing. At the outset, I would definitely like to thank the organizing committee members of POPMA, Practicing Oral Pathologists and Microbiologists Association, and JACE Academy of Higher Education and Research for having given me this opportunity to speak on silos to solutions, fostering industry-academia collaboration. Thank you one and all for your patient hearing.